He told me I lacked leadership qualities. A week later, I saw his girlfriend, who once asked me how Excel pivot tables worked, sitting in the chair that should have been mine. I didn't cry. I didn't quit. I just waited. Until that $19 million contract landed in my hands. And I knew what she didn't. He'd been lying to her from the start. My name is Rachel Donovan, and I've spent 11 years building my reputation at Bright Lane Strategies, one of Austin's most prestigious B2B consulting firms. At 37, I wasn't the oldest account director on the floor, but I was the one people came to when million-dollar deals hung in the balance. My corner office on the 14th floor overlooked the Colorado River, a view I'd earned through countless late nights and flawless client deliveries. Bright Lane wasn't just competitive, it was carnivorous. We played a sophisticated game where alliances shifted with quarterly earnings, and your best friend today could be undermining you tomorrow. But I'd learned to navigate these waters with a simple philosophy: let your work speak louder than office politics. While others gossiped by the coffee machine or played golf with executives, I focused on what mattered: results. The senior account partner position had been vacant for 3 months. Everyone knew I was the obvious choice. My client retention rate sat at 92%, the highest in the Southwest Division. I'd personally brought in $43 million in revenue over the past 2 years. More importantly, I'd mentored half the junior staff, including Sabrina Ellis, who'd joined us fresh from her MBA program 11 months ago. Sabrina. Even now, thinking about those early days makes my jaw clench. She'd seemed so eager, so grateful when I took her under my wing. I remembered her panicked face during her first client presentation, how I'd stepped in seamlessly when she froze. The hours I spent teaching her our CRM system, showing her how to read between the lines of client emails, how to spot opportunities others missed. Nick Rutledge had been promoted to senior management 2 years ago, overseeing our entire accounts division. 45, with silver temples and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was the type who memorized everyone's spouse's names but forgot promises the moment they left his lips. I'd watched him operate, studied his patterns. He valued perception over performance, image over integrity. The office hummed with its usual energy that Tuesday morning. Glass walls revealed dozens of consultants bent over laptops, their faces illuminated by spreadsheet glows, the smell of burnt coffee mixed with someone's expensive cologne. Everything appeared normal, but I could feel the undercurrent, that electric tension when big changes lurked just beneath the surface. I'd submitted my application for senior account partner 6 weeks ago. The interview process had been rigorous, but I'd nailed every session. 3 panel interviews, 2 case studies, and a final presentation to the board. Nick himself had nodded approvingly when I outlined my vision for expanding our healthcare vertical. "Rachel," he'd said, leaning back in his leather chair, "you're exactly what this role needs." Those words echoed in my mind as I settled into my morning routine, unaware that in less than 72 hours, everything I'd built would be hanging by a thread, and the knife in my back would bear the lipstick prints of someone I'd trained to hold it. The email arrived at 4:47 p.m. on Friday. All staff. Leadership announcement. My heart accelerated as I clicked open the message, already envisioning my name in bold letters. Instead, I read words that made my blood freeze. "We're pleased to announce Sabrina Ellis as our new senior account partner, effective immediately." I stared at the screen, certain I'd misread. Sabrina? The same Sabrina who'd asked me just 2 weeks ago how to calculate customer acquisition costs? My hands trembled as I scrolled down, searching for some explanation, some mistake. But there it was, her headshot, that practiced smile, and a bio that creatively inflated her 11 months of experience into something resembling competence. The office erupted in whispers. Through my glass wall, I watched colleagues exchange glances, their eyes eventually finding me. Some looked sympathetic, others curious, a few almost gleeful. I forced my face into a mask of professional indifference, even as my stomach churned with a mixture of rage and humiliation. Then I saw them together. Nick and Sabrina, walking side by side toward the conference room. his hand resting on the small of her back, a gesture too intimate for a professional celebration. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The lunches they'd shared, discussing strategic initiatives. Her sudden inclusion in high-level meetings. The way she'd started dressing, trading her ill-fitting blazers for designer suits that mirrored his preference for Armani. I waited until Monday to request a meeting with Nick. Those 3 days were agony. Each congratulatory email to Sabrina, another twist of the knife. I spent the weekend analyzing every interaction, every moment where I might have misstepped. But I knew, deep down, I knew this wasn't about performance. "Rachel, come in." Nick said that Monday afternoon, his corner office sprawling with its leather furniture and wall of awards. He didn't meet my eyes, focusing instead on arranging papers on his desk. "I assume you want to discuss the partner position." "I'd like to understand the decision," I said, keeping my voice steady. "My metrics, my experience, my contributions to this firm." "Your work has been adequate," he interrupted, finally looking up. "But leadership requires more than numbers. It requires a certain presence, an ability to inspire and connect. Sabrina brings fresh perspectives, innovative thinking. She represents the future of Bright Lane." Adequate. The word hit like a slap. I generated more revenue than any other account director in company history. And he called it adequate. "What specific leadership qualities did I lack?" I pressed, noting how his jaw tightened. "You're too focused on processes, Rachel. Too rigid. The board wants someone who can think outside the box, someone who brings energy and new ideas. You're excellent at what you do. But senior partner requires different skills." Sabrina demonstrated those skills throughout the evaluation process. "What evaluation process?" I couldn't help the edge in my voice. "She wasn't even eligible based on tenure requirements. We made an exception based on exceptional performance," Nick said smoothly. "She spearheaded the Morrison Industries renewal." "I spearheaded Morrison," I cut in. Sabrina sat in on 2 calls and took notes. His face flushed. "That's exactly the kind of territorial thinking that held you back. Leadership means lifting others up, not claiming all the credit." The gaslighting was so blatant I almost laughed. Instead, I stood, smoothing my skirt. "I see. Thank you for the clarity." "Rachel," he called as I reached the door. "I hope you'll be professional about this. Support Sabrina as she transitions. The team looks up to you." I turned back, meeting his gaze directly. "Of course, I'm nothing if not professional." Walking back to my office, I passed Sabrina's cubicle, soon to be vacated for an executive suite. She was on the phone, giggling at something, her feet propped up on the desk. A desk where I'd spent countless hours teaching her the fundamentals she'd now used to leap over me. But I noticed something else. A printed email partially visible under her keyboard. The header caught my eye. Originum Health Partnership Opportunity. My pulse quickened. Originum was a whale, a healthcare giant I'd been courting for 2 years. If there was an opportunity there, I should have been looped in immediately. That evening, I stayed late, waiting until the office emptied. Then I did something I'd never done before. I went fishing in the company's shared drive, looking for any mention of Originum. What I found made my anger crystallize into something harder, sharper. Nick wasn't just playing favorites, he was playing a much bigger game. And he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated me. The shared drive revealed fragments, but it was a misdirected email 3 days later that exposed the full scope of Nick's deception. I'd been copied accidentally on a chain between Nick and Sabrina, probably because my name sat next to hers in the address book. One misclick, and suddenly I held dynamite in my inbox. "Babe, don't worry about the technical requirements," Nick had written. "I'll make sure we have the compliance team fully staffed before Originum's final review. Focus on the relationship building. That's your strength." Sabrina's response made my skin crawl. "But we don't have half the certifications they're asking for. Won't they check?" "Trust me. By the time they do due diligence, we'll have everything in place. The important thing is to get them to sign the intent letter first. I've already told them we have a dedicated healthcare compliance division, 8 specialists. We'll figure out the details later. 8 specialists? We had 2. And one was leaving next month. I scrolled through the entire chain, my disbelief growing with each message. Nick had fabricated an entire division, complete with fake bios and capabilities we simply didn't possess. The contract value? $19 million over 3 years, the largest in Brightlane's history. I printed everything, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. This wasn't just favoritism or office politics anymore. This was fraud. And if Originum discovered the deception after signing, it wouldn't just be Nick and Sabrina who burned. It would be Brightlane's reputation, and every employee who depended on that reputation for their livelihood. But I also saw opportunity in this disaster. Originum Health had been my white whale for 2 years. I knew their CEO, Patricia Winters, from a healthcare summit in Dallas. We'd connected over our shared obsession with regulatory compliance, the very thing Nick was treating as an afterthought. I had maintained relationships with 3 of their board members through careful cultivation at industry events. The smart move would be to report this to Brightlane's board immediately. Let them handle the cleanup, salvage what they could. But smart wasn't what I wanted anymore. I wanted justice. I wanted to watch Nick's house of cards collapse while I held the match. Over the next week, I operated on 2 levels. Publicly, I was the consummate professional, even offering to help Sabrina prepare for her first senior partner presentation. Let me know if you need any historical data on our healthcare vertical, I said sweetly, watching her preen at my apparent submission. Privately, I was building a weapon. I pulled every piece of documentation on Originum's requirements, cross-referencing them with our actual capabilities. The gap was staggering. But more importantly, I began crafting an alternative proposal, one that was honest about our limitations but creative in our solutions. Instead of lying about non-existent specialists, I proposed a partnership with Kellerman Associates, a boutique compliance firm I'd worked with before. Instead of promising impossible timelines, I outlined a phased approach that actually addressed Originum's pain points. The breakthrough came at the Southwest Healthcare Innovation Summit. I knew Patricia Winters would be there, and I made sure to be at the same breakout session on compliance in the digital age. During the networking break, I found her by the coffee station. "Patricia," I said warmly, "I've been thinking about your keynote on systematic risk. You mentioned the nightmare of vendors overpromising capabilities." Her eyes sharpened with interest. "Rachel, yes, it's becoming an epidemic. We just had a firm claim they had an entire AI division that turned out to be 2 junior developers and a ChatGPT subscription. That's exactly why I wanted to run something by you," I said, lowering my voice. Completely off the record, as someone who respects your commitment to transparency, I've seen some concerning trends in how firms are pitching to healthcare giants like Originum: inflated capabilities, phantom departments, promises that can't possibly be kept. She set down her coffee cup. "Go on." "I've worked in this space for over a decade. I know what's real and what's smoke. If someone were to present Originum with a truly honest assessment of capabilities, even if those capabilities were smaller than what others might promise, paired with a realistic roadmap to meet your needs, that someone would get my attention," she finished. "Are you saying Brightlane is reconsidering its approach?" I smiled carefully. "I'm saying that there are those of us within Brightlane who believe in doing things the right way, who understand that a $19 million contract built on lies is worth less than a smaller contract built on trust." Patricia studied me for a long moment. "Send me something. Unofficially. My personal email." She handed me her card. "And Rachel, make sure it's thorough, especially the compliance section. That's where everyone seems to think they can cut corners." Walking away from that conversation, I felt the first real smile in weeks cross my face. Nick thought he'd won by giving Sabrina my promotion. But he'd made a crucial error. He'd forgotten that in this business, relationships built on trust trump titles every time. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The next 3 weeks required surgical precision. I couldn't use Brightlane resources or time to build my counter-proposal. That would be corporate theft. And I refused to stoop to Nick's level. Instead, I worked nights and weekends, transforming my home office into a war room. Every detail had to be perfect, every claim verifiable, every solution practical. I started by dissecting Originum's true needs. Their RFP mentioned compliance 17 times, but Nick's proposal, which I'd glimpsed during one of Sabrina's mentoring sessions, barely addressed it beyond vague promises. They needed a partner who understood HIPAA's latest updates, someone who could navigate the maze of state-by-state healthcare regulations. They needed precisely what Nick was pretending to have. My alternative proposal took shape like a symphony. Instead of fictional departments, I outlined strategic partnerships with 3 specialized firms, relationships I'd cultivated over years. Kellerman Associates for compliance, Data Secure Solutions for HIPAA-compliant infrastructure, and Meridian Consulting for multi-state regulatory navigation. Together, we could deliver everything Originum needed without a single lie. The brilliance was in the structure. I wasn't proposing to steal the contract for myself. That would be too obvious, too vindictive. Instead, I positioned myself as an independent consultant who could coordinate these partnerships, someone who could be the single point of accountability Originum craved. Brightlane could still bid for portions of the work, but only for what they could actually deliver. I sent Patricia the proposal on a Thursday evening, using my personal email, carefully worded to avoid any proprietary information. The subject line read simply, "A different approach to healthcare partnership excellence." Her response came within hours. "This is exactly what's been missing from every pitch we've received. Can you present this to our strategic committee next Tuesday?" Confidentially. Of course. Tuesday arrived with Austin's typical scorching heat. I called in sick to Brightlane, the first time in 5 years, and drove to Originum's headquarters in my best suit. The presentation went better than I dared hope. The committee asked hard questions, but I had real answers backed by real experience. When they asked about Brightlane's role, I was diplomatic but honest. Brightlane has excellent account managers and strategic thinkers, I said carefully. However, the scale of what you're requesting requires specialized expertise that's best sourced through targeted partnerships. I've structured this proposal to leverage the best of each firm while maintaining unified accountability. What I didn't say was that Nick's fictional compliance department was a ticking time bomb. I didn't need to. My honest approach spoke volumes about what they were hearing elsewhere. Meanwhile, at Brightlane, the Originum pitch was becoming Sabrina's crucible. I watched from my office as she struggled with basic healthcare terminology, saw her panic when Nick was in client meetings and couldn't feed her answers. The supporting materials she created were surface level at best, filled with buzzwords but lacking substance. Rachel. She appeared at my door one afternoon, looking haggard. "I know things have been complicated between us, but I really need your help. The Originum presentation is next week, and I'm drowning." I looked up from my laptop, keeping my expression neutral. "What specifically do you need help with?" "Everything," she admitted, sinking into a chair. "The compliance section especially. Nick said we have specialists, but I can't find any of their contact information. And these regulations? I don't understand half of them. Have you asked Nick, as senior partner? This is really your domain now." Her face flushed. "He says I need to figure it out myself, that it's a growth opportunity." Of course he did. Nick was realizing the magnitude of his lies and leaving Sabrina to drown. I felt a flicker of sympathy before remembering how she'd celebrated her stolen promotion. "I can give you some basic resources," I said, pulling out an outdated compliance manual. "But Sabrina, if you're representing capabilities we don't have—" "We do have them," she insisted. "Nick said we're hiring. It's just in process." I handed her the manual. "Then I'm sure it will all work out." That night, I received another email from Patricia. "The committee is impressed. We'd like to move forward with due diligence. One question. We're still scheduled to hear Brightlane's pitch next week. Should we?" I crafted my response carefully. I believe every organization deserves the opportunity to present their vision. However, I'd strongly recommend your due diligence team verify all claimed capabilities before making any commitments. In healthcare partnerships, trust is everything. The trap was set, not through lies or manipulation, but through the simple act of telling the truth in an industry built on exaggeration. Nick had created his own noose by promising what he couldn't deliver. All I'd done was offer Originum a ladder to climb above the pit he'd dug. As I watched Sabrina's frantic preparations from afar, I felt no guilt. In trying to fake it until they made it, Nick and Sabrina had forgotten the most fundamental rule of consulting. Eventually, every client wants to see behind the curtain. And when Originum looked behind theirs, they'd find nothing but empty space and broken promises. The unraveling began during Brightlane's pitch to Originum. I wasn't there. Of course. But Marcus Torres from IT filled me in later over drinks. Apparently, Sabrina had frozen when Originum's chief compliance officer asked for specific details about our 8-person compliance team. She'd fumbled through vague introductions of team members who didn't exist, even making up names on the spot. It was brutal, Marcus said, shaking his head. Nick tried to jump in, but Patricia Winters cut him off, said she wanted to hear from the senior partner who'd be managing their account. The death blow came when Originum requested an immediate site visit to meet this phantom compliance team. Nick bought time by claiming they were at an off-site training, but Patricia's expression made it clear she wasn't buying it. 2 days later, I received a call from Patricia herself. Rachel, we've completed our due diligence on both proposals. I have to say, the contrast is illuminating. I'm glad you found the information helpful, I said carefully, maintaining professional distance. We'd like to move forward with your partnership model. However, there's been a development. We've discovered some concerning discrepancies in Brightlane's proposal, claims about personnel and capabilities that don't match reality. Our legal team is unhappy. My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. That's unfortunate. Transparency is so crucial in these partnerships. Indeed. Which brings me to my next point. We'd like you to lead this engagement as our primary strategic consultant, not through Brightlane, but independently. We'll contract directly with you and the partner firms you've identified. Are you prepared for that level of commitment? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the moment. I'd need to resign from Brightlane first. Conflict of interest. We assumed as much. The contract is worth $19 million over 3 years. Your portion, as lead consultant, would be approximately $4 million. Still interested? $4 million. More than I'd make in a decade at Brightlane. Very interested. Can you send the formal offer? The next morning, chaos erupted at Brightlane. Nick's assistant accidentally forwarded an email meant for legal. Originum was threatening to report Brightlane to the Texas Attorney General for fraudulent misrepresentation. The phantom compliance team had triggered a full investigation. I was typing my resignation letter when Sabrina appeared in my doorway, tears streaming down her face. You knew, she accused. You knew about the compliance issue and you didn't warn me. You're right, I said calmly. I knew Nick was lying about our capabilities, just like I knew he was lying when he said I lacked leadership qualities, just like you knew you weren't qualified for that promotion. That's not... She stopped, her face crumbling. He told me I earned it, that I had potential. When? He told you what you wanted to hear, just like he told Originum what they wanted to hear. The difference is, Originum did their homework. She sank into a chair. They're saying I might be personally liable, that as senior partner on the account. I signed off on fraudulent claims. For a moment, I felt the weight of what was happening. Sabrina was 26, ambitious but naive. Nick had used her as thoroughly as he'd tried to use me. But then I remembered her sitting in my chair, giggling on the phone while I questioned everything I'd built. You have 2 options, I said. You can go down with Nick's ship, or you can tell the truth. That you were pressured into supporting claims you couldn't verify. That you tried to raise concerns but were shut down. That you have documentation of Nick instructing you to lie. Her eyes widened. I don't have. Check your email. The chain where Nick told you not to worry about technical requirements. Where he specifically said he'd handle the compliance team issue. Print everything. She stared at me. Why are you helping me? I'm not, I said, turning back to my computer. I'm telling you what any competent senior partner would already know. Consider it your last mentoring session. As she left, I hit send on my resignation, effective immediately. No 2 weeks notice, no transition period, just done. Within hours, the full story broke. Nick was suspended, pending investigation. The board launched an emergency review of all major proposals. Sabrina, taking my advice, had thrown Nick under the bus with a collection of emails showing he'd orchestrated the entire fraud. She kept her job but was quietly demoted back to account manager. By the end of the week, I was sitting in my new office, a sun-filled space in a downtown high-rise. My name on the door as managing partner of Donovan Strategic Consulting. The Originum contract sat on my desk, signed and delivered. $4 million and the knowledge that I'd won not through lies or manipulation, but by simply being the professional I'd always been. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Nick's been terminated, heard he's begging his wife to take him back. She kicked him out when the Sabrina affair went public during the investigation. I deleted the message without responding. The past was done, and I had a healthcare empire to build. The transition from Brightlane employee to independent consultant happened faster than I'd imagined. Within 2 weeks of signing the Originum contract, I'd assembled my team of partner firms, established our working protocols, and begun the massive undertaking of implementing a truly compliant healthcare consulting framework. Every morning, I walked into my new office with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Patricia Winters became more than a client, she became a champion of our approach. Rachel, what you've built here is exactly what this industry needs, she said during our first quarterly review. No smoke and mirrors, just solid execution. The numbers spoke for themselves. We were 3 months into the contract and already ahead of every milestone. Our compliance framework had identified and resolved 7 major vulnerabilities in Originum's existing systems, issues that would have cost them millions in fines if discovered during an audit. The partner firms I'd brought in were performing flawlessly, each contributing their specialized expertise while I orchestrated the overall strategy. But the sweetest vindication came from an unexpected source. I was reviewing contracts in my office when my assistant knocked. Rachel, there's a Nick Rutledge here to see you. Says it's urgent. I hadn't seen Nick since leaving Brightlane. Part of me wanted to refuse, but curiosity won. Send him in. The man who entered barely resembled the polished executive I'd known. His Armani suit was gone, replaced by an off-the-rack blazer that didn't quite fit. The silver temples that had once made him look distinguished now just made him look tired. He sat across from my desk in my office, and I let the silence stretch. Rachel, he finally began, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. I'll cut to the chase. I need a job. I kept my expression neutral. I heard you were starting your own consulting firm. He laughed bitterly. With what clients? My non-compete with Brightlane doesn't expire for 18 months. My reputation is shot. My wife took half of everything in the divorce, and the other half is going to lawyers. He leaned forward. You won. I get it. But I have 20 years of experience that shouldn't go to waste because of one mistake. One mistake? I couldn't help the edge in my voice. You committed fraud, Nick. You lied to a $19 million client about capabilities we didn't have. You used your position to promote your girlfriend over qualified candidates. You destroyed careers and nearly took down an entire company. I know what I did, he said quietly. But you got Originum. You got your company. You got everything. I'm asking for a chance to rebuild. I studied him, remembering every condescending comment, every dismissive gesture, every time he'd undermined my work while taking credit for my wins. But I also remembered something my grandmother used to say. The best revenge isn't watching your enemies fall. It's rising so high they have to look up to see you. I don't have any positions available, I said finally. but Kellerman Associates is looking for someone to manage their junior compliance staff. Entry-level management, heavy on the documentation and process work. The kind of rigid, uncreative tasks you once said held me back. His jaw tightened. The salary? About what a senior account manager makes. Maybe 60% of your Bright Lane compensation. I pulled out a business card. Tell David Kellerman I sent you. He'll give you a fair interview, though he knows your history. Nick took the card, his hand trembling slightly. Why would you help me at all? I'm not helping you, I said, standing to signal our meeting was over. I'm helping David. He needs someone who understands the cost of cutting corners, someone who's learned that integrity isn't optional. Whether that's you or not remains to be seen. As he reached the door, I called out, Nick, one more thing. Sabrina's doing well, by the way. She's at Montgomery Solutions now, working her way up legitimately. Turns out she had potential after all. She just needed the right mentor. He left without another word. I returned to my contracts, but my mind wandered to the strange symmetry of it all. Nick had been right about one thing. I hadn't been senior partner material. I'd been meant for something bigger. That evening, I stood at my office window, watching the Austin skyline light up. The Originum contract had opened doors I hadn't even known existed. 3 more healthcare giants were in preliminary discussions. My team was expanding. The $4 million projection was looking conservative. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Just heard Nick Rutledge is interviewing for an entry-level position at one of your partner firms. You're doing. Everyone deserves a chance to prove they can do the actual work, I replied. See, this is why we chose you. Integrity, even in victory. Looking forward to our meeting next week. We're ready to discuss expanding the contract. I smiled, tucking my phone away. Nick had taught me one valuable lesson. Power isn't about the lies you can sell or the people you can use. It's about building something real, something that stands up to scrutiny in the harsh light of due diligence. And in that light, I wasn't just standing, I was soaring. 6 months later, I sat in the conference room of my expanded office suite, watching my team present to our newest client, a Fortune 500 healthcare conglomerate that made Originum look small. We'd grown from a one-woman operation to a firm of 12 specialists, each handpicked for their expertise and, more importantly, their integrity. The meeting was interrupted by my assistant. Rachel, Patricia Winters is on line 1, says it's urgent. I excused myself and took the call in my office. Patricia? Rachel, I thought you should hear this from me first. Bright Lane just lost their last major healthcare client. Word got out about the Originum incident, and everyone's jumping ship. They're filing for Chapter 11 next week. I felt a strange mix of emotions. No satisfaction, no joy. Just a hollow acknowledgement of consequences finally catching up. That's unfortunate. A lot of good people work there. Here's the interesting part, Patricia continued. The bankruptcy trustee reached out to us. They want to know if you'd consider acquiring Bright Lane's client list and some of their assets. Your non-compete wouldn't apply since they're approaching you. I sank into my chair. The irony was almost too perfect. The company that had denied me a promotion was now being offered to me in pieces. I'll need to think about it. There's more. Nick Rutledge apparently put in a good word for you with the trustee. Said you were the only person with the integrity and relationships to salvage anything from the wreckage. After the call, I stood at my window, processing this final twist. Nick, working his entry-level job at Kellerman, had somehow found it in himself to recommend me. Maybe people could change. Maybe redemption was possible. Even for those who'd lost their way in the maze of corporate politics. I made my decision quickly. I would bid on select assets, the good people who'd been caught in the crossfire, the client relationships that could be rebuilt with honesty. But I wouldn't perpetuate Bright Lane's culture of shortcuts and favoritism. Instead, I'd offer those employees a chance to be part of something built on solid ground. The acquisition meeting was surreal. I sat at the same conference table where Nick had once told me I lacked leadership qualities, now deciding which parts of Bright Lane were worth saving. Several former colleagues were there, including some who'd watched my humiliation with barely concealed satisfaction. Now they pitched themselves to me, hoping for a second chance. I hired 6 of them, the ones who'd always done solid work, who'd been overlooked in favor of flashier personalities. Marcus from IT became my chief technology officer. 2 junior consultants who'd been struggling under the old regime became project leads. Each hiring decision was based on merit, verified skills, and a commitment to doing things right. The Austin Business Journal ran a feature on the acquisition. From overlooked employee to industry leader, how Rachel Donovan built an empire on integrity. The article mentioned Nick's downfall and Sabrina's role in passing, but I'd refuse to comment on either. My success wasn't about their failure, it was about finally being free to build something authentic. A year after that first devastating email announcing Sabrina's promotion, I received an unexpected LinkedIn message. It was from Sabrina herself. "Rachel, I owe you an apology and a thank you. You were right about everything. I wasn't ready, and I let myself be used. But you still helped me when you had every reason not to. I'm doing things the right way now, and I wanted you to know that." I typed back a simple response. "Keep earning it." The final irony came during an industry awards dinner. Donovan Strategic Consulting was being recognized for excellence in healthcare innovation, an award Brightlane had coveted but never won. As I accepted the crystal trophy, I spotted Nick in the audience, there as David Kellerman's guest. He raised his water glass slightly, a silent acknowledgement. In my acceptance speech, I talked about the importance of building trust in an industry often clouded by overpromises and under-delivery. I spoke about the power of truth in a business built on relationships. I never mentioned Brightlane, Nick, or the promotion that had changed everything. I didn't need to. Walking off that stage, trophy in hand, I realized something profound. Nick had been wrong about me lacking leadership qualities, but he'd also been inadvertently right about one thing. I hadn't been the right fit for senior partner at Brightlane, not because I wasn't good enough, but because I was meant for something far greater. Sometimes the worst professional betrayal becomes the catalyst for your greatest triumph. Sometimes being overlooked is just the universe's way of telling you to look higher. Nick had been right about one thing. I wasn't sharp enough to fabricate stories like he did. But I was sharp enough to make both of them lose everything over a lie I'd never forget. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of workplace justice, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever faced a similar situation at work? How did you handle it? Your stories inspire future content, so don't be shy about sharing.